All right. We have started. We are live on Facebook. Happy Wednesday, April 6th. I have a very special guest with us today. Somebody who has been working with us for a long time, 2019. Somebody who is a great entrepreneur and businesswoman, somebody who is an amazing provider and advocate for patients and for insurance policy change, and is making tremendous moves in her market in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm really excited that she's able to join us. When I met Piper Buersmeyer, she had one clinic, and now she has 3 clinics offering Deep TMS and Spravato at 3 locations. So it's been really amazing to see you grow over the last 3 years, Piper. And I'm super excited for today's topic because you're probably like me, where you can nerd out on like the operations back end, and like it needs to be perfect. Otherwise, you know, we're going to rattle the cage. So I'm super grateful and excited to have you here today. Piper Buersmeyer, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is a really fun presentation for me. I presented a while ago on how to run an efficient TMS clinic, and at the time, I don't believe we had instituted a lot of these significant changes yet. So this was an absolute game changer, and hats off to Scott because he's the one that gave us this idea. So we're going to mostly focus, the title of this presentation is, using softwares and systems to effectively run your company. And I'm biased to Monday.com. So I'm going to really heavily go into Monday.com, but at a high level, talk about how to view systems in general. So I have a bullet pointed document that I'm happy to share that kind of gives this high level view of what you're going to get out of an effective software. So whether you're using other methods and products, that's fine. But we're going to talk mostly about Monday. Is that cool, Scott?
Yeah. And before we dive in, I just want to ask you some questions to set the stage. So can you just give us an overview on you, your business, and what you're about?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So like Scott said, we are in the Pacific Northwest. We have 3 offices, 2 in Washington and 1 in Oregon. So Tigard, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington, and Longview, Washington. Longview and Vancouver are about 45 minutes from each other. We opened up TMS Northwest about 5 years ago, so fall of 2017, which is wild. I was 6 weeks postpartum with triplets and thought it was a good idea to start a TMS clinic. And it was a good idea, but it was ridiculous. So when you start a TMS company and you grow, your first year is kind of wild. You don't know what you're doing. You feed your own clients into usually because you have ideas of who should be seen. And then as you grow, you realize this pipeline has to stay primed, and you start looking at avenues to improve marketing and strength. And this is where Scott came in, and he was a game changer for our company. I'm grateful for this dynamic. Scott, you're in good hands with Scott, and I love that he brings value, and I'm hoping that this presentation does that for you. At our clinic, we do focus on, we use BrainsWave device, we do Deep TMS and Spravato. We don't do IV ketamine, just Spravato. And one thing that my strongest role in the company is an admin role at this point, and some patient care, but mostly admin. And so I do geek out if this gets a little bit complicated or overwhelming. That's not uncommon, because until you really get fluid with this, it can feel really intense. But once the system is, you can replicate it and you can teach it, and all your staff know how to use it, it is incredible because you're all on the same page. So that's, I think, one of the most fun parts about using technology to benefit your company.
Awesome. And we have some people in now, so great. We'll have a lot on the replay, but we have a lot pouring in now live. So if you're here in the chat, where are you tuning in from? Let us know. That's always fun to interact with you guys. So bring us back to when you just started, just had the kids, just hired us, and there were no systems. In other words, so why is there a need to do this and dial it in and be really intentional about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually something that I've really started to put a lot of work into, because the TMS world is, as you know, TMS came to the States in 2008, right? So it's not super new. It's 14 years old. But then when you're like, wait a minute, there's really no systems in place for majority of clinics. Majority of the clinics who ran TMS were doing it just flying by the seat of their pants. And so for me in 2017, that first year was just really, Julia and Brenda and I, who are co-owners, we were just in survival mode of figuring out what works for us. So you always need systems, even from the beginning. It's just ours were not always as efficient as they should be. And then as you grow, that's the really cool thing about growth is it's exciting to grow, but it shows all of your weaknesses. So as we grew, we started realizing deficits in our ability to market, our ability to effectively communicate amongst our team, follow through with patients, conversions. I mean, all these things, all the efficiencies break down when you grow. And so Scott, really, I mean, you didn't really come into play till about, 2 years in. And we recognized really quickly that how much work it was to educate the public about TMS. It's gotten a lot better, but even now it's still, the average person doesn't even know what TMS is. And most medical providers have no idea what we do, which is pretty shocking. So I graduated in 2009 and I wasn't trained on TMS. So we did a fellowship at Duke University to extend our education for obvious reasons. That was really important to Brendan and Julia and I. And so you find that there's so much to be had here. There's so many people we can help and serve, but if nobody knows about it and stuff that they hear can be overwhelming or scary or voodoo medicine, you want them to have information from a reliable source. So this is where, BR marketing is really come into play, because really, Scott, you took a big risk coming into this side of the business. I mean, you are kind of the person that stepped into the TMS world and said, whoa, okay, we got to get this out to the masses. This is really important. And you particularly have helped smaller businesses like us, who we needed the robust services that you offered and the reach that you offered, but we didn't know how to do it. And you have your magic and how you market and the funnels and all the things that happen, because in the mental health world, those techniques aren't really used, but in TMS, that's working because this is innovative and it's exciting and people want to hear about it, because you can't rely on your average referral sources with TMS and Spravato. You just can't, unfortunately. I wish we could.
Right. And thank you for the kind words. But today is all about you and what you represent, which is organization. And because, there might be people watching this who are at their first clinic thinking about maybe a second or a third, and maybe it just gets their head spinning, just thinking about, oh my goodness, how am I going to duplicate what I have already? So,
because you're right. You end up getting restricted in your growth, and/or you find as a business owner that you're working on godly hours. So there's consequences, of course, to not using systems, which I'm hoping today that Scott and I were really brainstorming about why this is so valuable, because, him and I, through our own businesses, have learned a lot, and we all want life, work-life balance. And we know that you probably do too. So hoping to pass the torch a little bit.
And I'm so happy to hear that you have some more work-life balance recently, Piper. And it's because when you have systems in place, it allows you to do that. You can move from a business owner operator to more of that owner role. Now, you as the owner, you'll always need to have your influence and your touch and your influence on the business. But once you set up workflows and things like that, I did a different presentation about core values too. If you don't want someone knocking down your door constantly, hey, what do I do? If it's within the core values for us and it's going to enhance the client relationship, do it. And if it's the wrong thing, it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. But that's how you start to build systems without you as the owner. And so I guess that's a good segue into, we can just jump into your sheet. Today's more of just like a conversation. So I might jump in and ask a question. But before we went live, Piper was showing me what she's going to show you today. And it's super impressive. And hopefully you guys get a ton of value out of it.
Yeah, and before I dive in, so what you're going to see is how we're using Monday.com, and I want to give some credit where it's due. One of the big decisions we made as owners was to hire a lead manager. So when we took on, when Beyond Marketing took us on as a client, we as owners, well, I in particular, because I was doing admin, I wanted to learn, move it through and through, and I did, and I learned a lot about how to use that system. So that was kind of my baseline education, right? So that's my lead manager, and there's so many robust services within Move. That's pretty impressive. What we were missing were two things: how to specifically have a person manage those leads, because having technicians or owners manage them was taking away from clinical and growth and marketing and all innovation. So lead managers was key in that piece. And then also how to use other technology once we secured the lead. So what we figured out is, wait a minute, we would secure these leads, but then we were struggling with them falling through the cracks if there was a missing piece of the puzzle, whether there was paperwork missing or whatever. This is where Monday.com really comes in. So I want to be clear that we use Move as a lead handler, and we use that extensively, but we don't have our entire staff on that, right? We don't want all of our staff having access to patients. That is a skill within itself. Talking to clients and really aligning with them, knowing their story, having buy-in, conversion. That's a whole different skill set than what I'm about to talk about. What I'm about to talk about is actually once the lead is converted onto your calendar, what do you do to make sure they're secure in showing up for their appointment? And that's kind of what I want to bring up. And then this also is going to go further, that if the provider says, yes, they meet criteria, how do we track that authorization all the way to when they get mapping? And mapping is that first appointment for TMS treatment. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context about the differences.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so if you guys have questions as Piper is going through this, please post them in the chat, either on Facebook, which I have on this screen if you see me looking over here, or in the Zoom webinar chat, and we'll answer them at the end.
And Scott, do you want to let me know if there's questions and you want to pause me and I can, because I don't see the Facebook ones right now.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So should I share my screen? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's go ahead and start rolling through it.
Okay. Excellent. So I want to first point out right here that this is kind of a document that I created with bullet points of what is the high-level takeaways from Monday.com. So each one of these bullet points, I could talk quite a bit on and expand, but I wanted to kind of have a high-level view of what Monday.com does. You'll probably gather a lot of this as you see me go through it, but once I go to that Monday.com screen, it's going to look really busy to you. It's going to look really complex, but it's actually extremely well organized, and there's a lot of tracking. So just high level, organization is the biggest thing that Monday.com does, as well as tracking. So I would say those are the top two. But as we go through, obviously efficiency, increasing communication, I'll kind of show you how. Accountability is a really strong one as well. So we can always see if a lead falls through the cracks, where do we break down? Was there a staff member? Was there a psych and P or provider that dropped the ball? And it's not about necessarily bringing the hammer down, but it's like, hey, what occurred here and can we fix the system? It's all about, that piece of it. Monday.com is really great at showing timelines of when things are done. When you're tracking everything, you can see everything, which I'll show you. And then of course, all the financial tracking, you'll see kind of where that goes on Monday, where you can see leads and conversions and things like that. Productivity is obvious. Motivation is a big one. Thing about tracking sheets and accountability with staff is there can be a little bit of a competition of how many evaluations are they booking and who booked them. So that's kind of cool. You can see which one of your staff members are able to do this. Now, this can also matter on their schedule. Let's say you have a staff member who's working, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. versus someone who's early. You can kind of see where are you booking those clients more often, which is pretty cool. Remote access, through a desktop and or your phone. The app on your phone is really smooth, which is fantastic. And then that constant communication, and it's extremely customizable. So these are kind of the main high level points. And so when I show you, kind of keep these in mind. And we have quite a few what's called boards. Boards are what Monday.com is all about, but I'm going to specifically show you the TMS authorization board. And this is when a lead comes in, whether it's from Move or phone or a referral, they are then put into this tracking sheet. So are we good to go to keep going?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we are going to look at what right here is this board and look at all the boards that we're using within our Monday.com. Now we do have, yeah.
Sorry, can you make this full screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Is that better?
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, so these are patient names, but last initials. So there's no issues with privacy. But these are called boards on the left side. You can see how many boards we use. We use quite a bit, and you can make sure that you can assign who you want to what board, which is pretty neat. So not everyone needs access to every board if you don't want to. But I specifically want to draw attention to this board. So I am going to show you current month right now, which is going to be drastically different than a month that's already been kind of seen out. So what I mean by that is in the month of April, right now, these are our clients that have been converted from whatever source they've come from. So we track that over here where it says source. So we mark where they're coming from. So right now in the month of April, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the leads from Move. So what's a really cool feature is you can hover down here and you can see that there's 13 that were scheduled, and obviously there's some that canceled, some that are not moving forward, the paperwork's in progress, and then med optimization. So what this means is when it's eval scheduled, that's when they haven't been seen. Once they're seen, the provider's going to come in here and change the status. So look at all the statuses we have. We have quite a few statuses. We've created these. And some are going to be used by the admin team and some are going to be used by providers. So providers might say, they need to schedule a peer-to-peer because they know, if there's a denial and they need to have a peer-to-peer. They might say, they use a lot of this button, submit TMS auth. Hey, they meet criteria. Let's submit the auth. And my admin team will see this pink color and she knows I'm ready to submit. Med optimization is used a lot. So in our clinic, we do a lot of med optimization prior to submitting for treatment approval because we believe that medications need to be doing the best they possibly can before we get approval. This is not commonplace in the TMS world. I personally think it should be. There should be no reason why someone should be on medication that would prevent their response to TMS, like a high-dose benzodiazepine, or if ADHD is not managed or sleep's not managed. We really push for med optimization at our clinic. And so we're going to see a lot of med optimization. I'll show you last month how many we've got. We might have a provider who sees 15 evals in a month and 11 of them are having med optimization. That's really common. This might go on between 1 and 3 months depending on the client need. This does delay treatment, but it improves their chances of response and remission. With the time and money they spend on TMS treatment, this is a no-brainer for us. Not to mention someone being on a benzodiazepine long-term is not great for their depression. Like I said, though, other clinics are just going to throw people in if they get approved with an MDD, severe diagnosis, and they don't care. We really do. So that's what I mean by med optimization. We don't do long-term medication management. We do transition them back to their previous provider, but that's what that means. So there's quite a few statuses that can all be edited by you when you build your board, which is kind of cool. So the status will change from eval to you saw. We can see providers. So right now, Corey's got 9 out of 13 evaluations for the month of April, and then Brendan has the rest. We put the date of the evaluation, and then when the provider sees the client, they put the date of when they did the charting. This helps accountability of, hey, the client was seen on the 5th. How long did it take the provider to do the charting? This is usually that day, but it can sometimes be later. Okay, so as you see, you can make whatever that you need. Now, this is all admin that was normally managing this authorization part of it. The provider will do the status change, but we track a lot of, what insurance. So right now, our biggest insurance looks like is probably what? So Regents and Moda are both 3 of the evals. And I'll show you a different month that's really built out. What location? Why, when they called in, what were they looking for? It doesn't mean what they're going to really get approved for, but what did they come in for? This helps us see where our marketing has been strong sometimes. So if we get a lot of heavy Spravato interest, we know that possibly those ads are doing better, and we communicate that to the Beyond Marketing team. Again, we talked about source. This is my admin team, who did the scheduling. So Cheyenne did 61.5%, so she did 8 out of 13. So, and then all of these things, I'll show you. These things happen once they're mapped. So let me show you a built out month for you, because I think that will really be really cool to see this. So let's we'll do March, because that was just recent. So let's scroll down and we're going to see and look all the movement in the color. So we had, for the month of March, we had 42 evaluations.
Wow.
And right, they became, out of those 42, 5 were our current TMS patients. Let's look at med optimization. 4 were med optimizations, and there's a lot of other statuses, as you can tell. A lot of not moving forward. Mapping was scheduled. So what this means is this, once they're mapped, this will change to current TMS clients. Like I told you, right now it says current is 5, mapping is 4. So in a sense, we have 9 approvals in a sense here. Paperwork in progress. So a lot of this is that, you know, we're still dealing with the charting for whatever reason. If we're missing med histories or we're missing something, we're waiting on 4 clients to get back to us. So you can kind of see how this starts getting built out. And you start seeing the dates of the charting, which is really, really helpful. So Corey is our main provider, does most of this. So he's done 28 out of 42. He's been scheduled with 28 out of 42. So if that gives you kind of perspective. And then see how admin team built this out? So this is pretty neat too. You can see that we've got 23 out of 54.8% were TMS interest, and then 31% were Spravato. And then we've got some combo. They're like, hey, I'm interested in both. And that's how we kind of build that out. Vancouver's, you know, most of our leads, you know, 54.8, and then Tigard's, you know, 35%. So this is that tracking that's so cool with Monday.com. This is really, really helpful in that way. Now, if you guys, one thing that's really neat to see, this is the auth tracking sheet. So what I mean by that is, let's see if we have, so see this right here, submit TMS auth, okay? So Corey documented that he was waiting on a patient update. So he was waiting on a patient update, and he is gonna document in here about what he's looking for. So this is what's really, really neat is that, you know, we talked about they need a PHQ-9, and we can kind of see that the conversation in these little bubbles on the left. So like right here, there's quite a bit of conversation in here. So we put the auth information in here. So once we get it, we put it here. So we always know where it's at. So this is the really neat thing about Monday. You can set up alerts, you know, that are either on your app or emailed to you, that you get those alerts from the conversation. And you can at people. So you'll at Piper, please answer this question or whatever. And you can put action needed, for example, see all the updates for staff. So they need something from me, they're going to change this to Piper update. And then I can go and I get an alert from that.
This is so great. I was just going to chime in and say, because it's built-in accountability. So if somebody's not doing their job or performing their role, well, number one, that's going to fall back on poor patient care, but it's black and white, or in your case and my case, colorful, exciting rainbow. And you can see, okay, if something is blank, it's just a dummy-proof way, in my opinion. And by the way, we're not affiliates of Monday.com, so we don't get any sort of incentive if we promote them. There's lots of these softwares. I've tried them all as a marketing agency, and this one's the best, in my opinion, by far. So if you're watching this and thinking, oh my goodness, this is a little overwhelming, it's accountability, which is really cool.
Yeah, it took us a long time to get here, and there's not really a lot of people out there teaching how to use this. That's one thing I have a lot of passion in, and it's funny, you know, Scott, let me show you something. So this is the other level of accountability that this is gonna blow your mind a little bit. My admin team was kind of love-hate at first, but this is the auth tracking sheet, right? So we have an authorization team that this is where they live. But let me show you where the rest of the admin team live. So when the lead is on the calendar and put in our calendar, let me go here and I'll give you like a current day, because it's gonna look drastically different than last month, but let me show you this. So this is where those appointments are gonna be put in here, and we're tracking every step of setup prior to being seen. So see how there's a lot of red, right? And then there's some green for sure. So what this tracking sheet does, which we didn't put it all together because it would be a nightmare, it'd be so big. So we do, you know, eval scheduled. You guys know what you're familiar with that. The provider's the same, location, the primary insurance. But do you see how we start doing tasks? These are admin tasks. So we do benefit checks. Is it done? Did we get the insurance card uploaded into the EHR? We clearly need that. Benefit text, we do a check and then we send them a text saying, here's your benefit checks, here's what we did. Spruce is our phone and telemedicine platform, and we have to send them an invite to set up their account and make sure it's set up. This is obviously all the requests have been sent, right? These the staff need to do. And then of course, paperwork complete is your patient's paperwork online through the EHR. So this is a really cool also board, because these are all boards that we track. Now let me show you like what March looks like, for example, because it's beautiful, right? All the green. So this is an admin team working their tail off to get every single step completed. I mean, that is impressive. So I mean, look at that. So 77.5%, and really the rest of them are not moving forward. And then right here, the reschedule. None of them have missing steps. So I never want to see red in this column. And I rarely do because our admin team is stellar. But this took us to the next level as well, Scott. So when you talk about built-in accountability, this is a really big deal as well, because we know where the breakdown's happening if these steps are not being done. So again, we have an auth tracking sheet and an eval, but this system right here is only to get them to that eval, because there's so many steps to get someone into an eval, benefit checks, setting up telemedicine, blah, blah, blah. But this right here is kind of the brain and the motherboard of TMS authorizations, right? So we might have a client that was evaluated back in December of 2021, but they're now just meeting criteria because they had to do med trials or whatever. So we don't move the client from month to month. We let them live where they did before. So what I mean by that is like, let's go to December. Here it is. So let's go to December just to have fun. So this is where I'd kind of look in here and I would see, is there anything in here that we missed with these patients? And our auth team does this. So like this, for example, there's going to be some conversation where this client needs a treatment extension. So she's likely a current client and needs an extension. So we're not moving their name down the month. We want to know where they started and then how long did it take them to get mapping, because this matters in terms of med optimization and things like that, or financial implications for the client. So we really like to reconcile, all of every client. And so like, look at this client's still in med optimization from December. So they're, 3 months into their med optimization, for example, and they're being seen right now. So this is really helpful too, is keeping them in the month that their evaluation is, so we can really start seeing conversions and how long it truly takes for some of our clients. Some get immediate approvals and some take quite a while.
So how did you decide that this is the way you want it? And how do you go about like making those decisions about how to set up your boards?
So great question. We realized that if we were not specific on who was doing what, and it was confusing to the admin team, it was not going to go well. So we actually created a document that's called the all-site high-level role. What I mean is we thought about every role, every task, who's doing it. So we created that document kind of at a high level. So what I mean by that is who handles, release of information requests, who does prior authorizations, who does TMS auths. I mean, I could go on and on and on. We literally have a person's name next to whatever task we've come up with, right? So at a high level, we did that. Then we thought to ourselves, okay, how do we create a board and organize or conglomerate certain tasks together? So we figured out that the evaluation setup process should be its own board. And the reason why is once that's done and the client's seen, we don't really care about it anymore, right? But we do care about the authorization tracking sheet. So we would have combined the two. It would have been completely overwhelming. And frankly, those are two different teams that are dealing with that. The auth team is different than the eval admin team, meaning that who's taking the leads and the calls and setting up clients. The auth team's not doing that. The auth team is managing when the client's already been seen, the psych and P says, yep, they're ready to get approved, and the auth team takes over. So that's how we kind of determine how to separate boards. And we like, for example, I don't know, you can probably see on our boards, we have a Spravato authorization board. So we do Spravato. So we have a Spravato auth board that's a lot like the TMS board. We also have an inventory board. We keep track of all of our inventory. We have a board for medical benefits where we track that. I mean, literally we can break down based on big topics or tasks, which are really helpful. And you can use Monday.com. We do use it for tracking release of information requests. This is really cool where if a psychiatric NP says, hey, I need this ROI sent, we track it. So see how that we mark it and look at this. The admin team can say, yeah, I'm done. Or, hey, I need help or whatever it is. And we literally keep track of every patient who's on here. So we use Spruce and the provider will say, hey, Nicole, can you get an ROI for Dr. Smith? Nicole will go onto this board, enter the client's name, and she'll put a working on it if she started it, and then she can hold herself accountable for release of information. So you can do this for pretty much any big thing that you want. We have task boards for staff that have tasks, like things that big level projects. Bank deposits, we track all of our, the date of the check and what was the amount. So I can always go back and reference. So I don't have to go through my bank, and that's really simple. We also used it. This was a big one at the beginning of every year. It's a pain. You have to do a benefit check and an informed consent usually. And we had to go through every single client and every single day and every single week. So imagine like this is January, like it was nuts what the admin team had to do. But we needed a tracking system because we didn't have a way to make sure everything was done. So obviously there's still some in here that, we're asking, at the very top, we go to the very top and you can kind of see insurance card, and we still have a couple. Benefit check was done, informed consent was signed. So that was another thing we use this board for too. You can do things temporarily, that's just kind of a once a year kind of thing that we do. So to answer your question, I mean, you come up with what is the task at hand, what are the steps to complete the task, and how do you organize that on a board? And that is hard to do if you don't know how to use Monday.com. One thing that we didn't use in this that is a tool is like the automated reminders. You can, there's alarms and automations you can do. In our world, it wasn't, I mean, we would just be getting tons of alerts, and our admin team goes into the month of April every day, so it wasn't necessary. The alerts can get overwhelming where you at people, and then if you're on that thread, people get alerts, so it can get a little bit overwhelming, so you have to learn how to navigate that too. But there is a lot of accountability for, I love this part in the admin side. So we're in the eval checklist one. So when admin's building the eval, I love it that if a client's not moving forward, we can say why. If an admin person cannot get them to do the paperwork, they might say, this is my third time reaching out. So then the provider's not like, hey, admin team, you dropped the ball. It'd be like, actually, no, look at the three different dates that I reached out. So there's not this like resentment or frustration or thinking someone's not doing their job. You can see how hard someone's worked. And we can celebrate that. It's a great way to use this for your review as an employee. You can say, look at all the things I booked, look at all the clients I converted, look at all the paperwork I got collected. So like for one of our clinics for paperwork, that's handled by one person because she loves it and that's her jam. So Nani handles TMS paperwork. And so she gets to own it and run it, and she's obsessed with her board because she loves managing the way it looks. And so you find the right personality of staff, and then you have to train them well as well so they know what they're doing. But it takes a certain personality for sure to thrive off this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to change your behavior at work too. Like if you're not naturally a spreadsheet type person, like doesn't matter. This is your job. This is what's required. And it's going to help. Again, if you're in this business, you should ideally be all about patient care. And if that means green boards equals good patient care, then click your boxes.
Yes. And I think that, it was so, it was a lot to be electronic. If someone's really, likes tangible things, it's hard to get to electronic, but once you convert, it's really, really helpful, which was great. I mean, it was really helpful. I was going to go back just a second and let me grab, where's my little, I wanted to show you guys my main screen. Why is it doing that? I wanted to show you that bullet point really quickly, but it's not letting me do it.
Oh, if you go to the top left to maximize your screen.
It's just not letting me, yeah. Because it normally...
It should pull the little green dot down.
Well, I was gonna talk about, let me just fix it really quick and I can get it for you. Yeah, this will be the easier way to do it. So I wanted to go back to this really quickly because this piece of it, how to use Monday.com with Move. This is where I was talking about the eval tracking, where you track these are the things we track. So we track, what's the primary insurance, secondary benefits checked, insurance card. So we convert all that into Monday because we don't have all of our staff in Move. So that's one way to also understand about Monday is it can help limit access based on someone's skill set or what they're focused on. So, Move manages those leads. And then once they come in, that's why we created a separate board. So I wanted to point that part of it out too.
Yeah, so basically what Piper's talking about is permissions, and we use this a lot too. So meaning certain departments only have access to certain boards. And then if you have sensitive information in certain columns, you can actually restrict views of that column within that board.
Exactly. And like we kind of talked about, here's some ideas on how to use Monday.com for other things, PAs, release information requests, billing board tasks. So billing's really cool. I'll put, if there's a claim denied, I track myself with billing. So I'll put the client, first name, last initial, and then I'll even upload a copy of the denied claim. And then the billing team follows through on that problem. And when it's fixed, then I, either archive it and click resolve. So you can literally use Monday.com for so many things. We also used it for if you expand offices and you want to track your expenditures. So when we expanded to Longview, we put all the items we bought for the office in Monday.com, and then you can also export that to Excel. So that was really helpful for our CPA because they really loved seeing what we were doing. And Monday.com was a great place to do it because it's so well organized, and my team had access to it, which was really helpful. So that's kind of an out of the box view as well.
So you could use it for pretty much anything that requires a step-by-step process or a workflow or that involves multiple people.
Yeah. And especially if you want to see the communication and the line of communication through Monday.com. And I really like it too if, with Spravato, Spravato is very complex with billing. And so we have to really track, our communication with the patient of what have we quoted to them? What have we said? So then we can all be on the same page of what we're doing for that patient. Which is really, really helpful as well. So I just really love it because I just have one place to go to really find everything out that I need to know, which is fantastic.
So got some questions coming in on the Facebook end. How long does it take to learn all of this?
Oh, that's a great question. So, building your board is not super hard to do if you have some training. Once you get the hang of it, that's very doable. That would take you probably a day, honestly, to learn how to build a board. Now, teaching your staff the routine on how to use the boards, that takes some practice because most people, if you tell them, this is what I want you to track, but they don't necessarily know how do I actually do that, in what order and how. So it's really important to practice it and really get with someone who knows what steps to take and how and when, and not putting things off, for example. So if you're doing something, go right to Monday.com and do it immediately. Don't, put it on paper and then convert over into Monday, which we've had staff do before. So you have to have a really open line of communication. We have a lot of accountability. We have weekly check-ins with screen shares. We literally look at their Spruce account. What does your inbox look like? What's your Gmail inbox look like? And that might seem intrusive, but our admin team really loves it in some ways because they've gotten help when they're struggling, like, hey, I'm buried, what do I do? And then our team can come in and be like, oh, here's where we see it. Monday.com is the same kind of way. We can see it, but getting on a Zoom call and saying, tell me how you're entering this information, or when you're doing this, or are you on the phone call with a patient? Or are you trying to do it electronically through Move? Many patients like to text. Many patients. People like to be on the phone. So one thing about Move that's fantastic, and through Spruce, is that we use a lot of text messaging, HIPAA compliant, to communicate and get a lot done, which is fantastic. So I would say to master this, I mean, you probably would feel pretty comfortable after about a month of really doing it. But the first week, you're going to be filling out the boxes. It's very elementary, but you'd master it probably within a month.
Gotcha. Okay, I've got another question for you, and thank you for that. So how often are you making changes to your Monday boards? Like as your process changes, do you then change that in the Monday board? And then what's the decision making along that whole
Yeah,
process?
so usually when we don't really ever take anything away because we pretty much, when we know we need something, it stays. It's usually when we've made a mistake, like if someone slipped through the cracks or we've missed something, we add it to the board or added steps to the board because we wanted things more black and white than they were. So when we did those evaluation checklists, the board there where we followed through on every single step, we used to kind of combine a couple of those tasks, and then we separated them. So like, for example, we used to have insurance card and benefit checks. Well, those are two separate things because one relies on the patient to message in their insurance card, and one is the staff doing the benefit check, right? And then we added the benefit text because that was another layer where patients were like, well, I wasn't told I had a deductible. But we could clearly see on Spruce, yes, we messaged you, and this is what we told you were going to owe. So it's just every time that we've ever had where a patient's upset or something slipped through the cracks, we usually pivot based on creating a better customer service experience or stepping up clinically. So not that often. Like these boards and how I've got them set up, I mean, they've been working like a dream. Just recently, one of my psych MPs said, hey, I'm having trouble getting cardiac clearances for ADHD meds. How are we tracking that? But that was not something on our radar until just recently because we're getting a lot of those evaluations. But once you're set, you're usually set.
Okay, great. And so I just lost my train of thought. I had a question and it escaped me, so keep going.
No. So when you ask about changing the board, I mean, it's easy to change the board. It's not like it's not that big of a deal. But most of the time, every clinic's going to have their own needs, right? So if you were to be like, okay, hey, teach me how to do this, I would explain why we do each one of those sections, and then you decide for yourself if that's of value to your clinic.
So it's more about understanding the functionality versus let me just do exactly what she's doing, for example.
Yeah, so if I can explain to you, well, this is how we use this information. Do you want to use this information? Most of the time, most clinics are going to want to do what we're doing in that regard. But like med optimization may not be something that TMS clinic does whatsoever. So they're not going to understand why we track those clients and why we communicate about those clients. So, I always like to explain why we do what we do, and then you just pick from it what you use or what's of value. It would be nice to have somewhat of a standard of how a TMS client experiences our business because it is drastically different throughout the country, and frankly, it shouldn't be. That's challenging, and that's just a product of the explosive growth of TMS, a variety of providers doing it, many providers who've never been business owners before. There's really no model for it. So it can be very unstable depending on where you go.
Yeah, and I just love to add in here. So I've been reading a lot of Patrick Lencioni recently, and he is a leadership expert, and he writes these actually like fable short stories. They're really easy reads, and they're really interesting. One book is called like the 5 dysfunctions of a team. One is called The Advantage. One is called Death by Meeting. So a lot of really interesting leadership fables and lessons. And you mentioned that when you do performance reviews, you just do a screen share and look at boards. So he talks about one of the most important things to have in an organization is trust. But he defines trust a different way than what I thought and what I've since pivoted my leadership style where, okay, Piper, you're on my team. I trust you. Here's what you need to do. Okay, I trust you. Like, here's the task, here's the assignment, whatever. But he talks about trust as vulnerability-based trust, meaning if I need help, hey, I need help. Or like you mentioned with the cardiac approval, like, hey, something in the system's not working. I need help, or I don't understand this, or have a team being comfortable being able to do that. And then what he really said really struck me where if you give your team a task or a project and you don't hold them accountable and verify that it got done and got done correctly, that is negligence. And that hit me like a ton of bricks because everyone here is adults, and I trusted that things would get done. And I was deploying the wrong type of trust in that situation. So we've since trained on this internally, and it ties into a great software like Monday.com, because when you build in the process in boxes or buttons to click, trust but verify, in other words. And if you don't check it, it's negligent, especially like you said. Most clinics we work with, the physician is also the business owner, and sometimes, it's their first time running a business, and there's these challenges, and they were running it off a spreadsheet. Like,
I mean, you bring up such a good point about when we first brought up screen sharing, which we didn't do in the beginning. Why we did that was the first layer, of course, was accountability and transparency. But what it did was it motivated our staff to be like, whoa, I'm going to be held to this standard. And if I'm not doing well either, I also have this person that can visually see my struggles and then problem solve. So the person that does these screen shares and does these weekly check-ins are not owners. Okay, they're not a supervisor in the idea that they're not going to come down on this person. They're more of the equal playing field. I mean, she's an operations manager, but we created a culture of, if something feels too hard, overwhelming, frustrating, it's too slow, that means something's wrong in the system. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. So we took out the personal piece of it a little bit more and started reminding them this was a systems problem. And the breakdown in our company frequently, and really culturally in most companies, is that no one likes to be vulnerable and admit fault because they all want to please and perform, and most people take pride in their jobs. So we had to also understand that the strength that it requires to be vulnerable and to show that and to be a leader is so powerful. So we've had a couple of staff members in particular who have shown up in that way and modeled how to do that. And it's created a very safe culture where we can talk about hard stuff, and then we can put our bright minds together and be like, oh, actually, I'm having that trouble too. So instead of hiding it and trying to fix it and really maybe not doing well and then getting called out by an owner because there's been a trickle-down effect of the problem, admitting like, hey, this is hard. Does anyone else have this problem? What do I do about it? We also use Voxer to do this as like a consulting thread where a psych MP might go on and say, hey, I'm having this trouble. It's just happened today. And I just like, oh, actually, I know exactly how to fix that. And boom, it was done. But he had to step up and say, hey, this has been going on. I've tried to fix it. I can't. Can you? And everyone got to hear it. He did it in a group format. He could have done it individually, but he did that because he knew it likely impacted other people. So what he could have done is gone to me individually. I would have fixed it. And then I would have gone back to our main thread. But he demonstrated you can talk about hard things in the group format. And it's created a bond that, again, I'm not perfect. Our first, 15 months, particularly of my other company, was horrific. So I've learned a lot as a leader too. So don't think that I think I know everything. I don't. But Scott is right on about what type of trust and how to create culture is really important. And systems are part of your culture. If you have the expectation of your staff from the beginning that you're held accountable and there's transparency, and you're also going to use innovation and you're going to pivot, so it might change. So you can't be so rigid it can't change. And you create that culture, there's more buy-in and excitement, and it's more invigorating.
Amazing. Okay, so we went through a lot. You shared so much value today. Thank you for literally, peeling back the curtain and showing us the foundation of how your business runs. I'm really impressed, and it's sparking some ideas for me. And by the way, if you don't use automations and dashboard views, I could show you that too in Monday.com.
Yeah, for sure. We don't use automations as much, but yes, dashboard's pretty awesome.
Well, so for example, or they call it an integration. So when you click that status, if you need to email somebody like a third party for the VOB or whatever your process may be, you could integrate it with your G Suite, your Gmail, or your email provider. Click like ready to send email, boom, and it'll just automatically send the email.
That's pretty cool.
I'm not sure if you use that function.
Not as much, because for us, unfortunately, providers are still so old school and use fax all the time.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Well, I mean, hospital systems use Epic, who's, multi-million dollar EHR, but, Advanced MD is great and we use it all the time. But yeah, they've started to really integrate in certain things. Like, hopefully they'll do this too. But yes, I hear you. It's pretty old school in some ways.
Yeah. So if people are watching this today and they're like, wow, this is great, but I could really use a helping hand in getting this set up, how can you help this audience?
Yeah, that, like I was saying, this is a pretty strong passion of mine. I have some big plans on a more high level outside of our companies that have always been my passion with consulting. So I do private consulting, and I've taken on a couple clients. And it's really fun. Clients that literally just got their TMS device, for example. Or I have a NP who said, hey, I've been in business for 2 years, but can you just take a look? Can you just come in and just be honest with me? Tell me where you think I could work on things. It's amazing how different views and perspectives will open up your eyes, myself included. It's really cool, actually. So yeah, I do a lot of that on the side just because I love it so much. So not like I have all the time in the world, but I haven't always had time for consulting.
Awesome. So people want to get on, say, an introductory call with you and learn about your consulting. How can they do that?
Yeah, you and I talked about creating a link. Is that what your idea was, Scott?
Yeah. So in other words, if you're watching this and you're like, oh my God, Monday.com's great. Piper's amazing. She's very smart. I can use her hands and brain to help me in my business as well. After this, with the replay, we'll send out, we'll attach a booking link.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be great. And yeah, I'm happy to provide just, a drive-by conversation, just kind of see if I can be a good fit for you. But from what you gathered today, I mean, you can kind of see this is just one piece of consulting. There's so much about TMS clinics, policy making, branding, all culture, all sorts of stuff. TMS is a really booming section, and Scott, you saw that from the beginning. So I think we both just get so fired up about alternative medicine. It's pretty impressive, and really it's mainstream now. It's not even considered alternative, which I love. So it's been even better as time has gone on, which is just such a cool thing to be a part of. So it's a really special thing.
Yeah. So just to finish up here, last question. So where do you see your company going in the next, say, 3 to 5 years? And where do you see the industry going as well?
That's a great question. So I'll start with the industry. So there's a lot of other indications for TMS that are used in other countries that we're just so far behind on. Even things outside of mental health. Smoking cessation, I think, is one of the most amazing things coming down the pipeline. Brainsway is, we have that coil and we've been seeing clients, and Brainsway has done a great job at navigating that. Because imagine if we could help people stop smoking and the health of the average American would skyrocket. So that's really cool. Smoking cessation is a big one. Addictions coming down the pipeline. This is a really, really big deal for obvious reasons, because most treatment for addiction is really challenging. And then, pain is a big one, migraine protocols. So the explosion of protocols is where the industry is going. Absolutely. That is going to be fascinating to see how the FDA handles that. There's a lot of money in the opiate industry. There's a lot of money in smoking. So you'll wonder where the lobbyists come out. So we will see. We will see. In terms of business-wise, that's a really good question. I personally, the part of why I love consulting is I love small business. I love individuals and helping them reach their strongest potential. But frankly, I would love to influence TMS policy on a very high level. What I mean by that is I would love a standardization of training of providers. There is not a thing so far, which I think is just atrocious. There's no standardization for TMS technicians. Yet again, why? I have no idea. There should be really a protocol of what the expectations are in that regard. A certification exam would be fantastic. The basics, of being a clinical thing. So I would really love to influence policy from a clinical side. I've already started to do that on the insurance side with nurse practitioners and getting insurers to recognize our scope of practice and allowing us to provide treatment that's within our scope of practice. That will be a fight that I'll never let go, because all I care about is getting TMS in the hands of who wants it and who deserves it. And providers who are trained in a scope of practice should be able to provide it. And there's a lot of barriers and groups who do not want it to be outside of anyone's hands but psychiatrists. And we all understand that psychiatrists are far and few between, and it's only going to get worse, unfortunately. So those are kind of my main goals, is the small business growth, and consulting is my passion. Really building our team has been like one of the greatest joys of my life. And then this high level policy and how to do that is going to be, that's another thing, because I'm going against, the idea of certification and requirements for TMS techs. This is going to cost clinics money, and it's going to limit, and it's also going to raise what we pay TMS technicians, for example, as it should be. So I want to just raise the bar in a general sense, but there's a lot of pushback for that. There shouldn't be, but there is. So.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, big goal. It's not just me and my clinic. It's like, here's what the industry needs, and you're amazing. And that's why we wanted to have you on. And when you told me that you're taking Monday, to the moon and back, and to see it all today, because this is the first time I've seen it in this depth, and it's very, very impressive. And I'm sure our audience got a lot of value today. So,
I hope so. Yes. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so take a look for the replay and the follow-up emails. We'll also post Piper's link. If you're impatient like me and you just want to get it rocking, just message us in Basecamp and we can get you guys connected. And thank you guys so much for attending. Piper, thanks for being here. Any closing thoughts?
I just want to say, my closing comment is that sometimes you don't really know your full potential as a clinician. Being a business owner, it is so suffocating at times. But when you nail it and you see the growth and things that you've done, it's a really amazing thing. But to be realistic about the sacrifice that it takes and how you live and breathe and your work, that's true, because there is a massive amount of sacrifice that it took to get to where I'm at. And it's okay to do some personal check-ins and figure out really what you want for yourself on a personal level. This is why I really love working on the small scale, because I think that guidance is so, there's not a lot of resources for the small guys. But really the small private practices are who are really making waves, because the level of care we provide at a small level is just unparalleled in comparison to facilities or massive companies who view people as numbers. And so don't ever underestimate yourself as a business owner or as a provider, or what impact you have in your community, because if we all serve our communities in our small ways, that impact is exponential through the world and through our country. And I think we forget that the small impact we have, it has a ripple effect. It truly does. So don't ever think that because you're not doing it big, it doesn't matter. You can be at any size and have an impact, and literally TMS changes people's lives, like 100%. So you can have that same kind of story. So try not to get too discouraged, because it's really easy to do the comparison game and get overwhelmed. And stick with serving your community and why you became a physician or a nurse practitioner or a PA. Go back to your basics. Whenever you're having trouble, go back to the basics. That's really important.
Wow, amazing. 3 clinics, 3 kids, 333. Love it. Thank you so much for being here, Piper. This was really great. Love your energy and your knowledge and your willingness to share. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Scott. Thank you for all that you do for the TMS and Spravato and ketamine world, because it's been so helpful. So thank you.
Yep, we have a blast doing it. So we just got to keep rocking. So thanks again, everybody. We look forward to talking with you next week with Sebastian, and we will talk with you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
See ya. Bye.